Hey adventurers, so today is going to be my wrap up for the month of November. I read 6 books or I'll talk about 6 books that I read in November. Talk about the 6 books that I was reading in November. That's what I was trying to say. Actually, I was trying to read 8 books in November. There was 8 books that I was working on in November, and only 6 of them were completed to a point where I will talk about them now. The 2 that weren't completed, one was Rhythm of War, which is my audiobook that I'm currently listening to, and the other one is the Wizard Knight by Gene Wolfe, which I have not yet finished. The Knight, which is the first book in that duology, and I was supposed to finish both of them. I was reading it with, we've talked about this before, but I was reading it with Liam and Shannon and Britton, and we didn't finish. I didn't finish any of it. I got about, 50 pages left in The Knight, so I'm getting close, but haven't finished it yet. Anyways, we've talked about that. Rhythm of War, I'll talk about that in December, in my December wrap up. So of the 6 other books that I was working on, I DNF'd 2, which is uncommon for me. I usually don't DNF things, but these 2, I just got to a point where I'm like, I'm done. I won't listen to any more of this, and I would get to a point where I'd pause it, and I didn't want to play it again. So I'll talk about those when I get to them. The other 4 I did finish, and we'll talk about them. So the first one that I actually finished one is called Turtles All the Way Down, Vaccine, Science, and Myth. And it's by anonymous authors, so I don't have anything to say about who the authors were or anything like that. And it's just a book looking at the science and the testing that the various vaccines have gone through or not gone through, and basically just looking at vaccines in that light. And I'm not really going to say anything about it because it's nonfiction. I don't have anything to say about it, and I'm not going to review it like a book. As far as the first thing that I listened to, the first novel that I listened to, or fiction story, that was The Rising Tide by Jeff Shara. This is a novel of World War II. It's the first in a trilogy, which I don't remember what the other 2 books are called or what the trilogy is called. But this is it's about a couple different things. It follows primarily a tank gunner, I think, more than driver, but a tank, somebody who fights in a tank, somebody who is a paratrooper, and it also goes back and forth around the politics and the various generals, and we see a little bit from both sides, from the American as well as British, and also the German side of things. And I haven't done a ton of World War II reading, but I really enjoy history, and I really enjoy reading and learning about this time period. And it was very enjoyable. I really enjoyed the writing style. The audiobook narrator is great. Just had a really good time and really good experience with this. I'm definitely going to continue with Jeff Shara as well as this series. I just don't know when. It's not as much as I enjoyed it and absolutely love reading and learning about history and all that stuff, I've got so much else to read that this one is just like, yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it, but it's not a instant I have to come back to the next book immediately type thing. But I did really enjoy it. Definitely recommend it to other history nerds, history buffs, whatever you want to call it. I'm not as much of one as I probably should be, but I did really enjoy this book. Next, I listened to The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. So this is one that I've really been enjoying Bradbury, what I've been reading of him, and so I wanted to read another one of his, and I had this one. There's a whole bunch of them available on Audible for free, and so this is one that I just had in my library waiting for me to listen to, and I picked it up because The Illustrated Man is a character in Something Wicked This Way Comes, and so I was thinking, well, that would be really interesting if this is a story about that character. I don't know that it is, and even if it is, it's not, because this is a collection of short stories with this kind of frame narrative of the Illustrated Man. And so it's not really a story about the Illustrated Man. It's a story about it's a collection of short stories. Usually, pretty much every one of them has to do with the future, with space, and with traveling to other worlds, to Mars or whatever, and just seeing how that affects Earth and what happens and what leads us to that point, and really very much a looking forward into the future and the horrors, because this was written as more of a horror novel than a fantasy or adventure or anything like that. And Bradbury's amazing as a writer, and he writes atmosphere amazingly. And so a lot of them were very sufficiently creepy stories, and I had a great time with the book. But it wasn't what I was expecting, but it was still really good, and I really enjoyed it. As soon as I realized that that was what it was going to be, I was able to change my expectations and enjoy it a lot more than I probably would have if I would have just gone in there expecting a story about the Illustrated Man and thought that that's what I was going to get the entire time. And so I did really end up enjoying the Illustrated Man. I'll have a review of it once I get there. But Bradbury is just rapidly becoming a favorite author of mine. All right, so then we get to the first one that I DNF'd, and that is Heirs to a Flawed Creation by E.L. Montague. And this is one that the author reached out to me. He saw my interview with Baldwin Balding, which is Mike Molman, and I can't remember the other guy's name off the top of my head. But I went on their channel and was talking to him, and so this E.L. Montague saw that live stream and reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to give two of his books a listen and review them, or at least give my thoughts on them. So I said yes, and they did sound kind of interesting, and so I was hoping that I would really enjoy them. And I tried really hard to listen to this whole book. And usually with audiobooks, I can just press through and keep going. And I got, I think about 70% of the way through. And like I mentioned at the beginning, it was one of those things where I just would pause it and I was like, I don't want to press play again. And so I just stopped listening to it. But it had to do with, I like the stories. I like the writing style. I thought that Montague is a good writer. I think this one is just this is not for me type story or book. And again, so Heirs to a Flawed Creation is it's sci-fi, but it's again a collection of short stories, and it is largely centered around androids. And that's kind of cool. There was a lot of really cool android stuff going on with the short stories, and just the way that he was telling really fit the atmosphere. And I thought there was a lot of really good stuff in this book, but there was just so much language and adult content that eventually I was just like, I can't do this anymore, and I don't want to. And so I put it down. I do have another collection from him that is more about humans, I believe, than it's either about humans or about aliens. I don't remember, but it's about a different classification of people than androids. And so I want to go and listen to that one and see what I think of that one, or at least try give it a shot at least. And hopefully I'll enjoy that one more than I enjoyed Heirs to a Flawed Creation. But I was really trying with Heirs, and I got to that 70% mark, and I was just like, I can't do it anymore. But I do think that for a different reader, these books would work way better than it worked for myself. So then I've got the next book that I actually finished, and this is Dawn Shard by Brandon Sanderson. Again, I listened to it. I do have the physical copy here, and I wanted to read this, but I knew I wasn't going to have time because I was working on Wizard Night and all that stuff, and I knew that I just wouldn't have time to read it before I read Rhythm of War, before I read Wind and Truth. And so I decided to pick up the audiobook, and it's a good decision, because it really filled in some things that I was missing from. Oh, I'm supposed to be holding this up. Some things that I had missed because I didn't read it the first time before I read Rhythm of War the first time. And so it really helped fill in some blanks there, and just helped flesh out the world, some of the characters and stuff like that, and was a beneficial read in that front. It was also fairly enjoyable. It wasn't, as I've continually noticed more and more with Sanderson, he isn't my favorite author anymore. Never was, but he isn't one of them really in that same way anymore. But this was better than I thought his Edge Dancer was, and it was okay. It was good. It's rather long for a novella. It's not a novella. It's 293 pages. I guess that's with the acknowledgments, and there are smaller pages, but that's beside the point. It's a long novella for sure. It's might near a novel, short novel length. But anyways, I enjoyed it well enough. It was good fleshing out the world. I do have some thoughts about it that I will talk about later when I actually get to my thoughts on, once I get to my review of this, then I will talk about it. But since I haven't gotten there yet, and I'm now kind of rambling about it, I will just stop. So then the last book that I DNF'd, because I mentioned I'm DNF'd 2, and this is the last book that I was working on before Rhythm of War, which I have not yet finished, so I won't be talking about that in this November wrap-up, was Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer. This is the 4th book in the Southern Reach series, or Area X series, or whatever, the first book being Annihilation. I loved Annihilation. If you've watched my reviews of Annihilation, or what are the other 2 books? Authority and Acceptance are books 2 and 3, and then book 4, which just released this year, was Absolution, and I really, really loved Annihilation. Like, that was a fantastic book. I thought that books 2 and 3 went downhill. Neither of them was as good, although they were both definitely readable. They were solid books, just not nearly as good as Annihilation, which I thought was utterly fantastic. So I was hoping that book 4, Absolution, would be at least as good as books 2 or 3, and so that I could enjoy it and go and read it and be like, I really like Jeff Vandermeer, all that kind of stuff. But in the first 70, I believe, % of it, again, right around that same mark for me, or the first, it wasn't quite 70%, it was about 70%, I guess. The first rather large chunk of it, 2/3 if you want to say it that way, of the book was fine. It wasn't great, but it was good, and I was enjoying it, and I was listening to it, and it felt like it was part of the Area X or the Southern Reach series. I just didn't quite know how it all fit into things, although more things were being revealed as you continued on through. But I didn't love it, and I was just hoping that, okay, well, hopefully the ending will wrap things up in a really satisfying way to make it tie into the rest of the series and make me understand how it really fits. So that was my hope. And then I got to that last part where it switches POVs and starts following a different character, and every other word was the F-bomb, and I was just like, I'm not doing this. And I tried, and I was like, nope, I can't do it anymore. And I just got so sick and fed up with it that I was like, there's not even a story here anymore. And so I just stopped, and I don't regret it. It was a good decision. I enjoyed the first part. I just wish that it would have stopped, or not been written. It was written, so I watched immediately after not immediately, before I decided to DNF it. I went and watched Nico from Nico's Book Reviews, his review of it, to see if maybe I should push through, maybe it gets a little bit better as you get into the actual story, that actual part of the story. And basically what I heard is that it doesn't. And so I was like, okay, well, I probably don't need to listen to it then. And yeah, I watched Nico's review of it, hoping that it would push me to continue reading it, and I came away from the review thinking I still don't know, and so I pressed play again. I was like, nope, I'm done. I just can't handle it anymore, and I don't want to listen to any of this, because there's no story, and it really doesn't affect the story. And so what he told me, or what he said in the review, was he understood why it was written the way it was, and I don't understand why that section was written the way that it was. And maybe if I'd have gotten to the end of the story, I would have understood it, but I didn't, and I couldn't push through to that far, and so I just was like, I'm done. I don't need to continue listening to this. I'm sad that the series ends on such a low point, I guess, but I'd rather DNF it than continue reading. And so I did, and now I am on to Rhythm of War, which I'm actually enjoying more than I did the first time, which I know I said I'm not going to talk about, but anyways. Now, that is what I read in November, or tried to read in November. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. Please like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.